Hello there everyone, Mr. E here, and today we're going to be talking about Ogryn's talent tree. I'm certain you saw from the title of the video, but today we're going to be tier listing everything in his talent tree, and it is a big one, so I hope you're strapped in for a little bit of a longer video because we got to go over all of these talents and at least give a brief description on why I'm ranking them, where I'm ranking them. Now note that I am doing this a little bit differently than, you know, the classic black background drag and drop the icon into the different tier list. What I'll be doing is I'll just be sliding one of these ranks over top of the icon so that you can visualize where it is in the tree, because I think with the similarities of a lot of these icons and the fact that people don't know the names or really anything about them, it's going to be a lot easier to visualize what I'm actually talking about if I can show you where on the tree I'm referring to the given ability. And I'll be also reading out all of the abilities just in case you're a person who is solely listening to this. Let me go ahead and give you my ranking qualifications for S through D tier. S tiers are the auto includes. They should be in most, if not all, builds. They're just that far head and shoulders above the rest of the crowd, and they are things like Bruiser, you know, just not to spoil too much, but things like Bruiser, which are almost no extra point requirement for anything else. And you just get this huge benefit. So S's are auto includes. A's are almost always included in builds. They are very strong in most builds, but you can skip them if perhaps you need to save points lower down. Say you're using like a range focus build and you don't need to melee that much. You might skip over one of these top melee toughness regenerating icons up here. But generally they are really good pickups, especially if you have any leftover points. A's are going to be your go-tos. B tier are neutral. They don't really hurt you to pick. If you need to pick them to get to something else, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, they're not really offering a whole lot to your build. Like, it's not that useful, but it's also not detrimental to your build. It's something that might be useful, but oftentimes it is not. C tier is where we start to get into questionable territory. These are things that just really are not worth the point, and just you might consider a better option. There are better options accessible if I'm rating something in a C tier. And then D tier, we'll have to go through it. Maybe it'll occur to me, oh, I can think of a couple off the top of my head actually. D tier are things that just are not really relevant in this game and are not really relevant to how Ogryn is played, and I can't in any good conscience advise you to choose these D tier things. You're wasting points. You could put these points anywhere else and they would be better spent if it's a D tier thing. And as far as positioning, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be averaging the ranking. So say there is an S tier icon or S tier talent behind a D tier talent. I'll be telling you that I am ranking it lower because of positioning, and I'll be rating it, like either an A or a B tier, depending on whether it was like a high S or a low S. But yeah, it'll lose some rank for being trapped behind another point tax, and that happens a couple of times in the tree. So let's go ahead and get into it. What I'm going to be doing is flipping back and forth between the game's lantern page so I can show you the actual talent text and read it out to you, and then we'll go over here and we'll put the relevant ranking on it. Hey there viewers, this is Mr. E. The E stands for editor here, jumping in from the future when I realize that this video is 2 hours long and that I don't actually ask anyone to like or subscribe until nearly the 1 hour mark. So that's what I'm doing here, is just saying, hey, I only have about 33% of the people that watch my videos that are subscribed on average. If you're one of those people who isn't yet subscribed and you enjoy this sort of content, please like and subscribe, help boost it in the algorithm, because these sort of videos, especially ones that are 2 hours long, do take a lot of effort and a lot of time to make and edit and upload and produce and all that stuff. So I really appreciate it. If you get to the 1 hour mark and you hear me say this sort of stuff again, you can go ahead and ignore it. If you have subscribed, I'll give you that permission, and I won't hold you up any longer. I appreciate you, and let's get back to the video. Mr. E, out. Let's start right over here in the top left with Linchpin. 50% coherency, toughness, regeneration. Right off the bat, we're grabbing our first D tier. Oops, I had the wrong thing selected there. Yeah, so this is D tier for the simple fact that coherency toughness regeneration is exactly what we strove to get away from when we redesigned, when had Ogryn redesigned. Coherency is a really bad form of toughness regeneration to start with because it does not scale with increased base toughness. So the more toughness you stack, the slower your coherency toughness regen is. It's a flat number, and you have to be near your allies, and you cannot be taking damage. You can't have taken any damage from range attacks in the last, I think it's full second, and you cannot have any enemies who are in your threatened melee zones. You have like zones, invisible zones around you, and this is the zone where if an enemy is standing in it, they can lock onto you and attempt to throw a melee attack. And for Ogryns, these zones are absolutely massive. They're like twice the radius of the smaller classes, so enemies can look like they're almost nowhere near you, but they can lock onto you and try coming in for an attack. You know, anytime you've seen one of the like little poxwalkers do one of those stumbling swings at you, that enemy is locked on. And as long as there's an enemy that's threatening you in one of those zones, you will not regenerate any toughness from coherency. So this is absolutely D tier. Trapped behind it is Furious, and I'm gonna give Furious C tier because of it being trapped behind this really bad node at the top of the tree. It's just not that powerful. Whoops. It's just not that powerful on its own, and then it's additionally trapped behind this really, really poor coherency toughness regeneration node. Furious, it is way better than the Zealot equivalent, where you only get the benefit for hitting multiple. Oh, by the way, what Furious is for each enemy you hit during the same melee attack, you gain 2.5% damage on your next melee attack. So at the minimum, right, you're gaining 2.5% damage on every melee attack, but this is only 2.5% damage. There's so many other ways you could scale your damage on Ogryn. Most of your damage doesn't come from your straight up melee attacks. This might be okay if you're doing like big cleaving strikes, but if you're fighting a boss or something, it's just 2.5% on every single hit, and you know, it's very hard to cleave more than say you know, like 5 enemies or so. It's just really not worth the extra points. It's 2 points to get this, and you get nothing for the first point, and the second one is pretty mid. So we're knocking it down from what I would consider a B tier to a C tier because of the positioning. Then we go to Heavyweight. Heavyweight is absolutely an S tier ability. This should be included in all builds. It's right here at the top center of the tree, and is also the gateway into both Smash 'em and the Best Defense, which are also good talents we'll get to in a second. But Heavyweight gives you 30% damage against Bulwarks, Crushers, Plague Ogryns, and Reapers. All very valuable enemy types to have damage against because those are high health enemies, so extra damage goes a long way towards getting rid of those targets, and you could receive 30% damage reduction against the same. These are also very threatening targets. Crushers, especially Crushers and Reapers, are very, very dangerous. Taking 30% less damage against them is a big deal, especially considering how much other damage reduction we have. It makes us very tanky against these threats. And yeah, really, really solid. You are the king of dealing with big boys with Heavyweight, and you should be taking it in every build. Then we have to go from Heavyweight into the two that follow it, both Smash 'em and the Best Defense. Smash 'em, it gives you 5% toughness when you hit a single enemy with a melee attack, increased to 15% if it's a heavy attack. So Smash 'em, its downside is if you swing through a single enemy and you hit a second enemy, it does not give you any toughness. And then conversely, we have the Best Defense, which only replenishes toughness if you hit multiple enemies with a single melee attack. On most melee builds, you want to be taking both of these to cover both eventualities, right? Because sometimes you'll just have a single boss in front of you and you need to be regenerating toughness, and most other times you'll be cleaving through a single target and hitting multiple targets. I would say in general, the single enemy one is very, very slightly better, but I'm going to rank both of these comfortably in A tier. All right, up here in the top right corner, we have Steady Grip. And Steady Grip is a curious case. It did recently get a change to its at least the values that it reads with, it's always given this benefit, but for the longest time it said 5% toughness regeneration. What it actually does is gives you 12.5% toughness regen per second while bracing your ranged weapon, which means that in 8 seconds you will have completely filled your toughness. A very nice buff, but you have to think how many of the weapons that are currently like really any good are consistently bracing, because you have the kickback and the rumbler, who are the top cream of the crop for Ogryn weapons, and those cannot be consistently braced because when you fire them you reload, and that reloading breaks your bracing, so you won't be consistently regenerating this while you're firing. However, things like the heavy stubber, the sniper rifle, heavy stubber, that one does benefit very well from it, and that's a pretty solid weapon. The twin-linked heavy stubber can also be consistently braced. Unfortunately, I think it might have gotten knocked down a number of pegs thanks to changes that they've made to the tree, so it's really not that prevalent as a weapon at all anymore. And then you've also got the Ripper gun, but I don't really see a whole lot of Ripper guns out there in the wild. And then Grenadier Gauntlet would be a pretty decent choice of this too, except for every time you shoot the gun you have a slight moment where you need to rack the next grenade in there. It's a lot shorter than it is with the rumbler, but that interrupts your regeneration as well. So I'm gonna rank this thing in B tier. I just think, I know a lot of people like this. It's good for generating your toughness when you have no enemies around, but I think there's so much other good stuff in the tree. I don't think it necessarily hurts you on most builds to have it, but it doesn't really help you all that much comparatively to other stuff in the tree right now. There's so many juicy things later down in the tree. You'll see a lot of S's and A's down there that we want to be getting to, so let's save our points up here for these kind of mid-tier ones. We got to go back and get the last one in this top little bit here. Towering Presence, 50% coherency radius. I'm gonna go ahead and give this one another D tier. I just don't understand the value of this coherency radius thing. How hard is it to stick within some proximity to your teammates? You are Ogryn, especially if you're Taunt Ogryn or whatever. You generate a lot of value by being near your teammates because of things like Bruiser and Psykinetic's aura and all of the auras and gold toughness distribution and stuff like that. You want to be around your enemies or your teammates already, and it's pretty easy to do. You don't really need extra coherency radius to do that, and this is just an extra point you don't need to spend, because if you want to go down here, which you have to and continue playing the game, and you've already taken steady grip, well, just go this way and get best defense. Best defense is definitely better. So I'm giving this a D tier because it just doesn't offer us anything. Like, when have you ever been like, oh, thank God for coherency radius? If I could give individual little nodes you have to take rankings, this one would be an S tier, because it not only is it 25 toughness, which is very nice, but it allows you to continue accessing the rest of the tree. But let's go on down and talk about our Blitz abilities. We have the Big Friendly Rock over here. Big Friendly Rock recently got a buff. It now comes out much faster. You can wield the rock much faster and chuck it much faster. It also got an augment, a modifier, that called That One Didn't Count, that replenishes a charge if you hit a weak spot or no enemies. So you can just throw these into the void with a 5-second cooldown, right? Here's my thing about Big Friendly Rock. I think it is pretty good. It's nice to be able to eliminate mutants specifically, because like mutants can be very, very annoying for Ogryns because they're hard to dodge, and we don't have dueling sword on Ogryn, so we can't just like instantly destroy him with most weapons. Most of the really solid Ogryn weapons take a few hits to get rid of him, and you can just get hung up on a mutant all day. But they don't have very much effectiveness against many other enemies. They don't have very much effectiveness against bosses or carapace or armored enemies, and they are only single target. And with improvements to one of the other Blitz abilities, which we'll talk about in a second, I think Big Friendly Rock has fallen really far behind, and I certainly can't really justify the modifier. Getting an extra rock when you land a headshot every 5 seconds, there's so much other powerful things you could be doing in Ogryn right now. Ogryn is kind of cracked at the moment. Like, every second that you're spending throwing rocks is a second that you aren't in there dealing 1100 damage with a single light attack, right? Or shooting 5 grenades. Yeah, so Ogryn is very, very powerful and destructive right now, and throwing single rocks at single enemies just ain't cutting it anymore for the general power level. So I'm going to give, oops, not D. I'm going to give our rock here a B. I think it's solid. It's not going to hurt your build, but it's not going to loft you up in the way that that some other stuff can. I'll give its augment, however, I'll give it also a B. I think that it's just kind of middle of the road. If you really want to do rock stuff, sure, by all means, be my guest and be a rock thrower. But I can't really foresee a situation in which you really have that extra point to spend. So yeah, I'm just gonna rank that together with it. Honestly, this B might even be a C, but I won't belabor it any further. We gotta talk about the big bomba over here, a frag bomb. Frag bomb, I can't remember exactly what the changes that were made to it are. However, I just don't think it's a wise use of resources currently. I am going to rank the frag bomb a C because I feel that frag bomb, it gets 1 charge per grenade pack, right? That is very low, and if anything, like, you know, you throw this bomb down, and if anything happens to be in cover when it goes off or whatever, it just completely negates the bomb that you threw. There can be situations where you throw it and everything was already about to die, or it doesn't even kill the enemies that you needed it to kill. I would much rather have more attempts to do what grenades I think need to do, which is disrupt enemies and kill some enemies, than to have one attempt at a really big showy one. I think frag bomb gets points for being very showy and bombastic, no pun intended, but I don't think that it is at all a like comparable to the other grenades. I think it needs something else. I think it should have 2 charges, honestly. This would be really helpful for it. And then my favorite grenade right now, and I think one that saw the most glow up, is the big box. Having 3 charges now is amazing. That is a lot of value from a single pack of grenades, and Ogryn is one of the best grenade users in the game right now because Zealots really shouldn't be using grenades. They should be using knives with the way their skill tree is set up. Veterans very seldom are going to be throwing grenades because they have so many regeneration perks. So all the grenades can go to us, and these grenades are so disruptive. They can... I save them now in case I see a teammate go down, and then I just hurl a grenade at them and run over there, and by the time the grenade starts exploding, I can pick them up fully, because every one of these grenades comes out in staggers. It does solid damage. Honestly, the little box add-on here, I think it's like a little bit overkill. I don't generally need it, so I'm going to give it a B tier. The extra 3 grenades, I could see a situation in which you might take that, but I think just the basic default skill, because all of these cost the same amount of points to get further down in the tree, just taking the box here is a really, really solid choice. And I've gone to taking that in every single one of my builds because it is just so disruptive. It knocks down crushers and stuff like that, and you get 3 charges of it, so you can hold them for when you really, really need them. You can really disrupt an area, as opposed to if you can throw one big bomb, it might miss half of the enemies, or it might miss the second wave that's coming in, and you won't have any more to throw then, and then the rock just doesn't disrupt anything, and that's what I think these grenades are best used to do. Coming down this way, let's get into the back into actual talents with Soften Them Up. Soften Them Up is S tier, absolutely. Soften Them Up gives enemies damaged by your melee attacks 15% more damage taken for 5 seconds. So think of it this way. You have a boss, say you're playing on Havoc, and in Havoc, bosses have like 100,000 HP. So everyone's wailing on this boss, right? And they've got to deal 100,000 damage to get him killed. If an Ogryn walks up and takes his pinky and taps that boss, instantly that boss takes 15% more damage for the next 5 seconds. So effectively for the next 5 seconds, they have had their overall HP reduced by 15%. You have done 15,000 damage just by applying this buff or this debuff to the enemy. So really, really important because it scales not only your damage, but all of your teammates' damage to whatever target that is. So Soften Them Up is an auto include in pretty much every build because you're going down this way anyway, and it helps everybody. Every Ogryn should be bringing this because it turns up damage to 11. Then we've also got this one right here, which is also an S tier. This is called Pumped Up. 15% damage resistance while above 75% stamina. If you've seen my builds lately, you've seen me taking this, but stamina is a super easy thing to keep full on because you do not use stamina when you are attacking, you do not use stamina when you are dodging, and you don't use stamina when you're shooting. So if you're a range build, you just take this automatically. If you are a melee build, you don't need to be shoving or sprinting while you're in melee. Just walk and you will have above 75% stamina, especially if you're using a talent later down called Slam that's going to regenerate our stamina very quickly. This is very easy to keep, and 15% damage resistance is a lot. That is a lot of stamina, or a lot of damage resistance for just passively having it for many builds. So S tier for that, for sure. We got Focus Fighter. Focus Fighter is an interesting one. It's only relevant on certain builds. I'm going to give it a B tier. What Focus Fighter does is every melee attack you make, you gain 4% damage resistance to melee attacks. And it can stack up to 5 times. So when you are in melee, you have to hit an enemy 5 times and you've got 20% DR to melee attacks. The next melee attack that hits you, it removes those buffs. I just don't think that is all that great considering the other things in this row. And yes, it can make you much more resistant to melee, but yeah, you have to get 5 attacks in between every time that it happens. And oftentimes when you're getting hurt in melee, it happens in quick succession because you get stuck in a bad place and like a couple enemies hit you back to back and you don't have the time to get it back up between that. What I would like is if this ability gave you stacked it up per hit and then you got like 1 or 2 seconds worth of the defensive buff when you first get hit. Just like the way that Can't Hit Me Again over here works, where when you do get hit, you have that resistance for a few seconds, and then you have to wait for it to recharge, in this case by meleeing. So B tier for that one, I think. Strongman. Strongman is a pretty nice buff. This is, I think, is a nice quality A tier. What Strongman does for you is it gives you 10% damage resistance on elite kill or special kill for 5 seconds. You know, we're coming down this way anyway. A lot of times you'll have an extra point left over to spend. We are pretty dang good at killing elites and specials on Ogryn these days. And you'll do that a lot on higher difficulties. It does only last 5 seconds, but you know, that might be enough to survive the passive damage that's coming in on you from gunners and stuff while you pick off an elite or a special. So it doesn't hurt you. I think it's a pretty solid A tier. It's a decent pick, but if I had to spend only 1 point to come down this way, I would definitely be grabbing Pumped Up. Let's go up here for Payback Time. Payback Time is also an A tier blessing here. Payback Time gives you 15% damage for 5 seconds after a successful dodge or being hit by an attack. So every time an enemy swings at you, basically in melee, or attacks you with a range attack, you are going to get 15% damage, right? Because think about this: if an enemy shoots at you, if you get hit, you get 15% damage. If you dodge it, you get 15% damage. So whenever you are being attacked, whenever an enemy launches any attack against you at all, you get 15% damage. Very strong. There are other ways to get 15% damage, and it only does last 5 seconds. You know, a lot of times when you're really on the aggressive and you're just beating the absolute crap out of enemies, the Ogryn is so good at staggering stuff that oftentimes the enemies don't get a chance to even attack you back, so they might not be triggered then. It's certainly not as strong as the Soften Them Up, because Soften Them Up increases all damage that they take from all targets, but it's still really, really good, so A tier for sure. Then we've got Can't Hit Me Again. Can't Hit Me Again gives you 20% damage resistance versus ranged for 2.5 seconds after getting hit by a ranged attack with a 4-second cooldown. Actually, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change a little thing here. This one is getting the B tier. And this one over here with the melee thing is getting a C tier. And the reasoning for that is this one, every 4 seconds, passively charges up, and you get hit at the end of that 4 seconds, and for the next 2.5 seconds, you have 20% DR against range. And this is awesome because of exactly what I said before about the way that we take damage in this game, right? When you get hit in melee, it's almost never just like one hit. Especially if you just take one hit, you don't actually take any damage to your health from that. You just take toughness damage, right? The second hit is when you start to take health damage in melee. So we want to be defending against several bursts of damage. That's why the curio, we weren't called curios, they were called trinkets or whatever back in Vermintide 2, called Iron Bark, I think it was, or Bark Skin. It gave you defenses when you were hit multiple times within a couple second window, and that was very, very strong because when you do get hit, you're going to get staggered and you're going to get hit again really quickly. And the Focus Fighter does not have that, and it has this prerequisite of wanting you to have to stack it up yourself by meleeing. So if you're not able to actually melee anything, you're fucked. And it only applies to melee attacks, which is a lot less common than getting shot with ranged. This one stacks up passively every 4 seconds, and when you do get hit, say like you've got a Reaper or someone who's locked onto you, right? The Reaper doesn't just shoot you once, he shoots you consistently, and so for the next 2.5 seconds you have extra tankiness against him, and that is going to buy you the time to get to him and shut him down. So I do actually really like this one. I don't think it's necessary to move further down in the tree, but if you're having trouble with range attackers, you could go a lot worse places than Can't Hit Me Again. Keep Shooting, 15% reload speed when reloading an empty clip. Now this one is, it's pretty good if you're using a range build, and I think I'm gonna give this an A tier. That might be a little bit on the high side, let's say A-, but the reason it's A tier is because, one, when you are shooting guns on Ogryn, right, most people who are in combat, in the middle of the firefight, you're not reloading early. You are reloading when you run out of ammo. You want to only reload when you have to. And so that applies to every gun for the Ogryn. And then for the Ogryn's two most powerful guns, the Kickback and the Rumbler, they have a limitation on their DPS that is mainly based around how quickly they can reload the gun. And so this is essential for them because they have one shot, so you instantly reload afterwards. 15% reload speed, especially considering this is positioned over the ranged tree, is very, very solid. So we do indeed like Keep Shooting quite a bit. A tier. All right, coming down this way, if I was ranking these two nodes right here, the 15 toughness is just a little bit better. Toughest DR is fine. We have so much damage reduction in this build already, or in this tree already. We don't really need it. Yeah, 15 toughness goes a long way on Ogryn. Okay, and now we have to talk about the abilities. Let's start left to right with Indomitable. Indomitable is the Ogryn's charge. You charge forward. Every enemy except for bosses is not only staggered, but they're laid out on the floor. They get full top tier staggered, the same level of stagger that the Veteran Shout or the Void Blast staff does, where crushers go to the ground. And after you finish that charge, you gain 25% attack speed and 25% movement speed for 5 seconds. So you're zipping around, and this only has a 30-second cooldown. It has quite a long range. This ability is for certain S tier. Very, very, very strong ability with an incredibly short cooldown, given the way that Ogryns can regenerate their cooldown so quickly. It has amazing crowd control potential, and it newly has had added the fact that you dodge range attacks while you are charging forward. Oh, and you can't be mutanted or dogged while you're going on, but you can be trapped. So don't be fooled. Trapper nets are not ranged projectiles, they're like entities, and so you can be trapped out of one of these charges, so be careful with that. To add on to it, this has a few augments. Stomping Boots, which gives you 10% toughness per enemy hit with Indomitable, also definitely S tier. Just the ability, especially like, you know, on higher difficulties, you often have this ability up and ready, and so as soon as you get hit and chunked, that's your time. Not only do you retaliate against the enemies and put them into the worst possible situation for them to win the engagement, being that they are on the ground and now vulnerable to damage, but you recoup a percentage or all of your toughness by running them over, and now you have the upper hand. It's the same thing with the Veteran Shout, right? It's a complete reversal. It's a complete script flipper. It's like, okay, I'm surrounded on all sides by crushers. No, and my toughness is broken. Oh, nope, never mind. I pressed shout, and now all the crushers are on the ground, and my toughness is full. And that's the exact same thing that's going on here. So Stomping Boots S tier. Over here we've got Trample. Trample is an A tier ability here. The only reason I'm not giving it a higher ranking is, well, by the way, Trample is for each enemy hit by Bull Rush, you gain a stack of Trample, up to 25 stacks, and each one increases your base damage, which is the best type of increase of damage, by 2% for 8 seconds. You know, this isn't the longest duration in the world. It could be 10 seconds, but it stacks up to 50% damage. That's very, very good. It's better at higher difficulties. You know, I don't rate it necessarily S tier, because many times when you charge, you don't charge over 25 enemies. On higher difficulties like in Havoc and stuff, you absolutely do, and it becomes even more valuable. But I'm saying for like the average player, you might hit 10 enemies with it, and that gives you some value, but you know, it's all right. You could maybe even save the point, but I think it's worth it. Pulverize, on the other hand, I think is just B tier. It has fallen down a lot from where it used to be, because it used to be, remember, there's two sources of bleed, well, a couple sources of bleed for Ogryn. The primary ones, though, for melee Ogryns are this and Batter. And Batter used to only apply on heavy attacks. So the thing is like, if you wanted to put bleeds on enemies, you either had to heavy attack them, which takes a long time, or you had to run them over with Pulverize on the charge. And so people thought it was really good back then, which it was, just to get everything bleeding and get that stack up for your defenses. But now you don't really need that, because every melee build, which, you know, who's running Indomitable, it's not running a melee build, can and will be applying Batter through melee attacks. If you're not using Batter in your melee builds, you should be. And so how hard is it to get enemies, like, you know, what is it, 4 enemies around you bleeding with the way that new Ogryn has this Batter on every attack? It's not hard at all. It's very, very easy to hit 4 enemies with, like, it takes like 1 melee attack to get that buff. And so oftentimes the enemies in front of you will already be bleeding because you've been meleeing them, and then you run them over. You know, you don't need those stacks anymore. They're probably already fully stacked out anyway. So I rank that a little bit lower. It's fine, but you should just take Trample instead if you're going to take one of these augments. Okay, let's go on to Loyal Protector in the center, our Taunt. Taunt enemies within 12 meters, making them attack only you for 15 seconds. The effect repeats after 3 seconds, and it repeats again after 6 seconds. Notably, those repeats do not have the same stagger effect. When you activate the initial effect, it can stagger backwards. Things like trappers who are about to initiate their attack, or mutants who are charging in, or bosses, or you know, anything, right? It'll knock away bursters and overheading crushers. All of them are just given a little tier 2 knockback where they are staggered backwards a half step and interrupted in whatever they're doing. So it's a good effect, but it doesn't repeat. But what does repeat is the other effects of it, including taunting. So the last taunt will go off 6 seconds after you activate the first one. So effectively, for the next 21 seconds, you will actually have enemies around you taunted. So for about half of the cooldown of 45 seconds, you're going to have enemies around you taunted. Now, there's other ways to lower the cooldown, but that's pretty dang good. And this ability has soared from where I approximate it was before this update to being absolutely S tier now. These abilities are some of the strongest in the game. They're not gold toughness printers. Sorry, like they can't be that, but like these are on par with those, just in a different sense, right? If you are a good player, you can do some crazy stuff with Indomitable. You could very easily solo missions with Indomitable. It's such a huge steroid to how much damage you deal, and it makes you so fast and evasive. You could solo all day with this thing. And then you've got Loyal Protector. Loyal Protector, if you have game sense and you're working with a team, if used appropriately, the enemies can only attack you for 20 seconds, which means your team just gets to do whatever they want. Like, think about how powerful that is. 20 seconds where your team can just kill, and they don't have to worry about, like, little things coming over to hit them. Not to mention all the other buffs that this is about to throw on. So, absolutely S tier. Then we get to throw in No Pain. I mean, it's following after it, but, like, I don't know. Maybe there's someone in the world who is, like, takes Loyal Protector and then just doesn't even take any of the augments. They just go this way or whatever. But No Pain... Loyal Protector and its repeats replenish 10% toughness and an additional 0.5% each second per enemy affected, up to 10%. So let me explain this. Every time it triggers, the 3 different times it triggers, you will replenish 10% toughness. So if there's no enemies around you and you hit Loyal Protector and no enemies ever come near you, you replenish 10% toughness that first time it bursts out. Then you replenish 10% toughness instantly the second time it bursts out, and then you do it a third time. If there are enemies around you, how it works is not how many people think it does, but what it is, like say there's 5 enemies that are right beside you, right? If you taunt these 5 enemies, you get that 10% immediately. And then the game says, okay, there were 5 enemies, so this guy is going to regenerate 2.5% of his toughness every second for the first 3 seconds. And then the pulse goes out again, and it counts up all the enemies again, and so this time there's still 5 enemies, and it adds them. So now it says, okay, now you have 10 stacks of this. So now you're getting 5% per second for the next 3 seconds. And then the third time, the same thing. So you would have 15 enemies total that it's counted over the 3 pulses, and so for the last 3 seconds, you would have 7.5% per second. So this is actually really, really nice because it's almost guaranteed that between the 3 pulses, you'll be able to add up enough enemies that you'll be regenerating a lot of toughness. And this is a great way to keep your toughness full. It's extremely strong with gold toughness generating classes, because what can happen is, like, okay, say you get a veteran on your team, he shouts and you're in gold toughness. Okay, so an enemy hits you, and the way gold toughness works, right, is when you are hit with gold toughness, as long as there's any gold toughness in your bar, you cannot take health damage. So an enemy hits you, and it knocks you, let's say like a crusher, like takes a side swipe at you, and it knocks you out of gold toughness into blue toughness, and you have like 10% of your blue toughness missing. Well, in the next 0.1 seconds, since this is a constant regeneration effect, it fills back up and re-golds your health bar. And the second you have even 1 gold toughness, you're protected. So effectively, like, you could take repeated blows back to back to back, and because this regeneration is so fast, and because it's a consistent regeneration, it makes you nigh invincible. It is super, super strong. So this is absolutely, I mean, I ranted about this forever, but this is also absolutely an S tier thing. You're getting it if you're going for taunt, but like, yeah, it's really, really good. I was super excited to see this on taunt when they first showcased that this was the new rework for it. Then we got to talk about its other 2 modifiers, Valuable Distraction and Go Again. Go Again gives you 2.5% cooldown of your Loyal Protector every time you stagger an enemy. Ogryn is the king of staggering stuff, baby. He's pretty crazy at that. So, this gives you your cooldown back super fast. Pretty much you'll have it up more or less constantly. you'll have it up again by the time the effect is worn out, which means you're going to have a lot of toughness regeneration, which is really awesome. I will rank this one an A tier because it's not absolutely essential, and I'm going to rank the other our other modifier an A tier as well, because they are both, while very powerful, they are, neither one of them is like guaranteed you have to take this. I want to leave those choices open because I think both of them are very, very effective in their own rights. If you're running a melee focus build, I think you should take Go again, because having more toughness regeneration when you're in melee is just going to keep you that much safer. And you need that extra cooldown because it's very unlikely that you'll have the third source of cooldown in your build that's later down. It's in the burst limiter override tree. If you're going for a build that can use this talent right here, maximum firepower, and you just want to support your team, and especially if you're going more ranged focused and you're staying away from damage, then valuable distraction is very, very nice, because this can augment everybody's damage and its base damage, which means it's really, really strong. So I'm going to give both those A tier because I think they're about equivalent. They just serve different purposes. And then finally, we have to talk about Point Blank Barrage. Oh boy, I'm going to make some people mad by talking about this, aren't I? Point Blank Barrage is in a bit of a not optimal situation right now. Point Blank Barrage is the unfortunate black sheep. It used to be fairly strong in the Ogryn tree. It certainly wasn't as strong as Indomitable was, but it used to have its place, and now I really just don't think that it does. I think that you could get similar, if not better, results from using Taunt, because look at the way the tree is constructed, right? It costs you no additional points. If you're coming down here and you're going to get the ranged tree, you can take Taunt, and it costs 0 additional points to have Taunt instead, and then just come back over here and grab the ranged stuff. So now, if you're going for a ranged focus build, you don't have to take this. You could take Taunt, which is an S tier ability and has lots and lots of use cases, and can increase your damage and can just make you really hard to kill. Or you could take a Burst Limiter Override. Well, let's talk about what Burst Limiter Override offers us. Okay, so Burst Limiter Override swaps to and reloads your ranged weapon. You have 25% rate of fire, 65% reload speed, 50% reduced brace movement speed penalties, and gain 15% close range damage for the next 10 seconds, with a cooldown of 80 seconds. Okay, so first thing, let's start at the bottom and work our way back up. Base cooldown of 80 seconds. That is a huge cooldown. Okay, that's the longest cooldown of an ability in the game, right? I'm trying to think. I think it is. I don't think there's any cooldown that's longer than that. Like, this is a really, really long cooldown, and as we'll talk about in just a second, it doesn't have that much effects. So it blows my mind, because this buff, this mediocre buff, lasts only 10 seconds, which is like comical. Like, Veteran Shout gives you gold for 15 seconds. Chorus, Zealot's Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude has a 60-second cooldown, and then it has 7 seconds where it makes everyone around you invulnerable and regains all their toughness, and then it has a 10-second Linger Gold buff afterwards. Like, those skills are good and crazy, and this one falls so far behind that mark. But here's the thing that really gets me about this, is you see this big wall of text and it's got all these different buffs, but it's all for ranged weapons, right? But think about the ranged weapons the Ogryn has, and think about which of these buffs actually apply to any given weapon. So let's take, for instance, like the Rumbler. Okay, so it swaps to and reloads your ranged weapons, so that might reload your Rumbler for you. That can be pretty good. Okay, so we got one value out of it. It can give you one free reload. Then you get 25% rate of fire. That doesn't matter on the Rumbler because it fires one shot, so whoop-de-doo. 65% reload speed, so you can put grenades back in better. That's good. 50% reduced brace movement speed penalties. No one is bracing the Rumbler, so that's out. That doesn't do anything. And 15% close range damage. Rumbler is generally not used at point, within 8 meters of yourself. So that may or may not be useful. And it only lasts 10 seconds. So you only get a couple of the benefits. Let's take, for instance, the twin-linked heavy stubber. Okay. So you swap to and reload your ranged weapon. This can be good because it reloads this magazine, which takes a long time to reload normally, right? You get 25% rate of fire. That's good because this weapon, it's all about firing fast. 65% reload speed. Well, you very likely, if you're building a twin link stubber, you're very likely not going to reload during this buff. You're probably going to wait for the next point blank barrage to reload it for you. 50% reduced brace movement speed penalties. Yeah, you're probably bracing this weapon, so this could be something. But again, it's reducing penalties, which is not really a buff in my approximation, and 15% close range damage. Generally, also, these weapons are not within the close range on you, and again, only last 10 seconds. All right, and let's take a third weapon as an example here. Let's say the kickback, which is another fan favorite weapon. Okay, swaps to and reloads your ranged weapons, so it may or may not reload your kickback for you. 25% rate of fire. That's not useful. 65% reload speed, that is useful. Brace speed, not useful. Close range damage, it is useful for the kickback for some of the time. So what I'm saying is only about half of these buffs, which are middling buffs to start with, are applicable to any weapon that you're holding. They don't all apply to every weapon, so you're getting like half of the buffs. And then we got to talk about these things out here, but let me just go ahead and give my rating on this thing. I think it's B tier. I don't think it's like hurting your build to do it. I mean, it is in the sense that you aren't choosing Loyal Protector, but it's not like, I can't say it's helping you. It's not like it makes your build like a little bit better. But yeah, it's just nothing. It's kind of very like middle of the road right now. Bullet Bravado. While point blank barrage is active, replenish 2% toughness for every shot fired and 10% toughness on each reload. Okay, this is just low. 10% toughness on each reload is pitiful because that's like you might reload your grenade launcher like 5 times during the duration of these 10 seconds or something, right? So that's like that's 50% of your toughness back. That's pitiful. We've got Loyal Protector over here that can print 50% of your toughness in like 4 seconds, and it continues to do it while you're doing other stuff. You have to be shooting and reloading for this to work, or you have to be like firing super fast to get your toughness back. Pretty much Bullet Bravado really only works for like super fast firing guns, and God forbid you have those weapons that are right in the middle, like the heavy stubber, the non-twin linked one, where you don't fire all that fast, so you're not getting that much toughness back from each shot. And then you also probably don't reload because they have a big enough magazine you won't reload. So yeah, it just ends up like not getting either of those buffs as well. And then we got to look at both of these modifiers, which both receive nerfs in the patch. I don't know what happened, but I think that Fat Shark took a look at some playtesters who were playing probably exclusively with this build, with the fire build, and we're just abusing point blank barrage and bringing home really big numbers. Because no joke, point blank barrage before the Ogryn talent tree rework, you could drop some really huge numbers with like kickback and stuff like that, and rumbler and twin link stubber. Like you could drop some massive numbers taking these into like Auric Damnation games. Yeah, it wasn't good in Havoc, but like yeah, you could drop some big numbers, and they probably saw that and were like, okay, this needs to be reeled in. And I think they did too much, because before, what we had on this one out here on Halo Fire was 30% rending. And what this allowed you to do was just kill crushers and maulers. Those are the two targets that just are not really affected by many single shot or like heavy single shot damage weapons. And yeah, you really couldn't hurt them at all until you activated this, and then you could literally one shot a crusher if you got a crit and landed a headshot. So they nerfed that to make it 15% rending and 15% damage to your range attacks, which is fine for many other targets. It hurts your crusher damage, but it's whatever. But I just don't think you need that 15% damage for most stuff. It's like rending literally doesn't give you any damage against anything except for crushers and maulers, and it'll give you like 15% rending would give you what? I think it's like 3% boss damage or something like that. Like 3% versus every other type of enemy. So it's very, very minimal. And then you get 15% damage. Whoop-de-doo. Light 'em up got hurt the worst here, though. Ranged attacks apply 4 stacks of burn while point blank barrage is active, max stack 16. Hey, a 16 stack burn isn't anything to shake a stick at. Like it's pretty spicy, but this used to be a 32 stack burn, and that eviscerated bosses because that burns are like exponential. The like 3 stacks does more than like, you know, 1.5 times the 2 stacks, right? It's like doubles every time. So it gets really crazy when you get into those high numbers. And it used to apply 2 stacks per attack. They made it like this so that you know, lower attack speed weapons that weren't just the Twin Link Stubber could actually get this cooking on enemies, but they reduced the cooking. So it really hurt it in that regard, because that build is just now kind of dead in the water. It's just like an average level of burn now. It's comparable to like a max stack Soul Blaze burn where you have 15 stacks on a Flame Staff. That's a comparable level of damage. So yeah, both of these got hit pretty hard. What I'd say is that the rending one, if you're gonna come out this way, the rending one is probably the B tier. It's 15% damage, and then because fire, the way fire works is like, you know, it really only comes into effect on larger targets that have a lot of health to burn through. You're gonna probably get a C tier there, because it has less effectiveness against bosses than it used to. Overall, I think that this part of the tree is in a really weird place, considering how stupid powerful these abilities are, and these are just kind of like whatever. Like, if you watch my video from earlier today, it's a grenadier build. It does like millions of damage with the grenade launcher, but do I need this to do it? Hell no, this doesn't do anything for me. I'm gonna take Taunt, because Taunt just prints fucking toughness and jerks the enemies all over the map, makes them do whatever I want. So really cool stuff. Okay, and that concludes the first part of this tier list. There you go. I'm gonna take a quick vocal break, and then we'll rejoin for part 2. Alright guys, we are back with part 2 of this informational tier listing of all of the new Ogryn abilities, and this is one of my favorite types of videos to make. I love talking shop about all this stuff, and I'm having a great time, so I hope you are as well. If you are, like and subscribe. I really appreciate you. Join the mystery machine today. Yippee, you can become a member if you want, all that stuff. I won't badge you about it. Let's get back into this. Let's talk about some of these new abilities. All right, up here, what do we got? This is Beat Them Back. 15% melee damage on successful heavy melee attack. Last 5 seconds. Okay, so we have 2 archetypes going through a lot of the rest of this tree. We have heavy attackers and we have light attackers. And light attackers have a big advantage, I think, in the current meta, because a lot of it shifted away from the heavy attacks having all of the glory, right? It used to be that heavy attacks were the only people that got to apply batter. This was solely a heavy attack aura. But now that light attackers get all that stuff, they don't have to invest additional talents into just specifically light attacking. So this one right here, though, I do think this is an A tier talent, and that's because it can benefit both. So a lot of times you'll have I use this with my the slab shield, because the slab shield right now, it has a super high stagger value on that heavy one where you slam them with the edge of the shield, and then the enemies are laid out, and because they're laid out on the ground, they're staggered, so they're taking extra damage, and then the light attacks in that club are actually pretty fast, so you can come in and bop bop bop, and for the next 5 seconds after you heavy, those light attacks are doing extra damage too. So yeah, this works really well on builds that utilize both or only heavy attacks, right? If you're only a shield edge slammer, or you're just using pickaxe heavy sweeps or something like that, or just heavy with the Mark 1, that can be really good. But yeah, I'm gonna give it A tier. I think it's solid. Crunch is interesting. So Crunch is a stacking thing just like thrust. It has 5 stacks, and so when you're holding crunch up, it gains up to this much bonus, 15% damage bonus and 30% impact bonus when you're charging a melee attack based on your charge time. So it does actually charge up pretty quick. Like, it's not nearly as long as old crunch used to have to hold it for, and you do get part of the buff if you release it early. It's good. It's both impact and damage, which is not too bad. And right, it also comes after something that is very relevant for it, right? You're already using heavy melee attacks. This is the thing that goes with heavy melee attacks. So I'm going to rank this also A. I think crunch is pretty good if you're doing a heavy melee attack. It's a pretty much no-brainer, right? You're just, and this is I'm ranking it highly because of the same reason that I think thrust is an absolute S tier blessing on dueling sword, right? So many engagements in this game are not happening, like enemies aren't all around you and you're like, oh, I need thrust now. It's like, okay, I killed this enemy and I'm moving on to the next enemy. Here comes this crusher. You have a second before you get to that crusher in which he can't attack you, but you can get ready to attack him. And so you just charge up that heavy attack. And then when you get to him, the first thing you do is you unleash that thing on him. So by having things like this and thrust that can just, basically you're investing in damage before you even get there, you can make certain that first blow is the killing blow, more or less. Bonebreaker's Aura, A tier. A tier for sure. This is the new aura being 10% melee damage for you and allies is very strong. I mean, it's not S tier like Scavengers or whatever it's called, Survivalist Aura or cooldown aura is, but 10% melee damage is applicable to zealots. It's even applicable to veterans. Everybody's using a dueling sword most of the time. 10% melee damage can make a good bit of difference. And think about like captains, right? Captains are vulnerable to melee damage. Their shields are vulnerable, so people aren't range attacking them down. So when everyone's wailing on them, just by having this aura, effectively you're reducing their HP by 10%. So that can be really, really nice. Okay, coming out this way, Strike True, 10% melee weak spot strength. Now this one is very interesting. 10% melee weak spot strength, if you hit a head, this is a unique stat that isn't anywhere else in the game. There is a similar stat that is in the veteran talent tree that when you activate your ability for the next 10 seconds, it's like down, by the way, if you want to check this out, it's like down here in the veteran talent tree. When you activate an ability for the next 10 seconds, you have, I think it's like 25% weak spot strength. And that's very, very strong because what it does is it gives you a multiplier afterwards. And this is the same thing. It's 10% weak spot strength. Every time you hit a weak spot, it's going to do the damage and it's going to multiply it by 1.1. So it is very strong. And Ogryn has the unique advantage of being at such a height that almost all of his attacks on all of his weapons are right at head level for most enemies. I'll finish games and I'll have like over 1,000 headshots. It's so easy to headshot on Ogryn. So I'm giving this an A tier. It's just a solid thing, and it leads into an even more solid, absolutely S tier blessing, which I know you all knew this was going to be S. It's Batter. Batter is 2 stacks of bleed on melee hit and 4 stacks on heavy melee hit. This was already an S tier with the heavy melee hit way back when, like a week ago. But now with having 2 stacks on a light hit, this is insanity. Because it's so easy just to have a horde in front of you and go bup, 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 and now all of them, like 6 to 8 stacks of bleed is enough on its own to kill like light enemies without even having hit them. And then 2 stacks, like 4 stacks of bleed, if you only hit an enemy twice, they're ticking for like 68 damage or something like that. So a lot of like specials and stuff, you'll hit them like twice and then they'll just bleed to death on the ground with just light attacks. So this does a lot of work for you, and it's also triggering other things you have. The bleeds on Ogryn especially are very powerful because they stack with his other damage enhancements, right? If you hit the enemy with Soften Them Up and they're staggered with some like certain weapon blessings that give you extra damage when the enemies are staggered, or you have payback time active, or you have trample active. All that factors into that bleed damage and makes your bleeds absolutely massive. So batter is amazing, and yeah, that it's available on all melees now. It's pretty much auto include on any build that wants to focus on doing melee. Coming across this way, we got Slam. Slam gives you 25% impact bonus on melee attacks. Staggering an enemy with a melee attack replenishes 5% stamina with a 1-second cooldown. Now, this is, I'm going to also say, is A tier. And I got a little bit of a explanation. I got some splaining to do on this one. The reason I'm ranking this A tier is because well, one, it gives you access down here, and this is, you know, we like that too, but 25% impact is pretty good, especially if you aren't taking any further impact in the tree. That does make a considerable difference for Ogryn. Ogryn has issues with staying evasive to enemies, right? Other classes, when you have, like, say, a pack of ragers coming in, what's the zealot do? Well, he stabs the first rager in the head, and then he can like backslide. Like, really, he has a lot of agility to like move himself out of the way in order to not take those rager attacks and stay mobile. The Ogryn is so large, he's gonna get hit from time to time unless you can make certain the enemies are so concussed they literally can't do anything. So Slam and Impact in general is very good for that. That's why Crunch is also super good. But then the other thing this does is if you stagger an enemy, you get 5% stamina, which means that you can use a push and then you'll get part of that stamina back with your melee attacks, and that keeps your stamina high for pumped up. It also recharges your stamina, like say you had to sprint into an engagement and you need to start regenerating stamina and get it up for the next time you need to sprint. This also does that for you. So yeah, it's good. I'll give it A tier. Then we get Brutish Strength, 4 stacks of brittleness on push. I gotta think about this one. I think I'm just gonna give this B tier. I haven't found any real uses for putting this into a tree yet. Okay, and then we have Brutish Strength, which gives you 4 stacks of brittleness on push. Now, I haven't really found an excuse to use this in too many builds yet. One, you should note that it is not required to go further down the tree because you can skip straight from Slam straight down to stay close to the aura. You know, here's the thing, is like 4 stacks of brittleness on push. The max stacks of brittleness is 16, right? And one, the Ogryn already has like clubs and stuff that can apply brittleness. But two, are you really pushing like a crusher or something 4 times? I mean, 4 stacks of brittleness, which they don't say here, but generally brittleness are 2.5%. So is 10% brittleness going to be a lot against a crusher? And more importantly, against a crusher, is 10% more damage, or like, is the push even going to do anything, right? So you're just going to shove this guy. He's not going to like even flinch, most likely, and then he has 4 stacks of brittleness, which is like not that much. So I want to give this one B tier, just because it's kind of out of the way. You don't need to take it, and it's not like going to revolutionize your build. I know I see a lot of people getting excited about it, but hey, if you want to apply brittleness to enemies, may I introduce you to the Bully Club, which can literally apply 4 stacks of brittleness with a single light attack. That is what we like. If we're trying to stack brittleness, which does have considerable effects, yeah, just use the Bully Club and brittle enemies up real easy with that. Okay, so going on from here, we have this interesting little thing down here, Simple-Minded, 30% corruption resistance. I'm gonna give this one a C tier. You know, if this was last Havoc League with all that stupid fucking corruption, I would rank it a little bit higher. But, you know, there's so much crazy good stuff in these trees. One, you have to take this talent right before it, which is like, okay. And then two, what is this giving you? Like, okay, I've been hit by a burster. when you get hit by a burster, right, you take 100 health damage, and then you take 50 corruption damage. So instead, you would take 34 corruption damage, or no, sorry, 30, yeah, something like that, right? You would end up taking like 35 corruption damage instead. You'd still take the 100 health damage. So yeah, I just don't really understand. If you're really that afraid of corruption, I guess just take the curios. Yeah, it's kind of a weird inclusion. I understand that it kind of fits with Ogryn's stuff, but it's, you know, we're playing the game to win here. We're not playing to resist corruption. I can't think of any times where I've been like, oh my god, if I only had some corruption resistance, I'd be in such a better situation in this game of Ogryn. 95% of the time, the corruption, 99% of the time, the corruption that you get is coming from getting downed and having purple on your health bar, and that's not the sort of resistance that they're talking about. Okay, let's go over here to the right. We've got, for the little ones, on ally getting toughness broken, gain 10% strength and 25% toughness damage reduction for 10 seconds. 30-second cooldown. On ally getting knocked down, gain stun immunity and 25% revive speed for 10 seconds. Shoot. I mean, like, here's the thing, is this relies on your allies to fuck up, right? Which is never a great type of talent to have. It relies on your allies getting their toughness fully broken, which is a big ask considering, you know, on lower difficulties, it's like, if that happens, are these stats going to help you in that situation? No, it's like they are in trouble, not you. This doesn't say you, by the way. It says on ally, not on yourself or ally. So someone can correct me if you're like a playtester or something and you know this activates on yourself as well. But like, this is a 30-second cooldown. I don't understand why this needs to have a 30-second cooldown. How often is this happening that it needs to have a cooldown at all? If your allies are getting knocked down like crazy, just give it a stacking buff. And then if they do get knocked down, I think this is the part where it's a little bit more useful. If an ally does get knocked down, you gain 25% revive speed for 10 seconds, and you get stun immunity. So like nothing can stop you from getting that revive off. Now Ogryn already can just like brute force revives because he can trade health for it. But yeah, this just ain't it, fam. Like, this is a D tier for sure. It's like, you don't want talents where you're playing from behind. You want talents that keep you playing ahead of the enemies. And like, because they have to get their toughness fully broken, there's so many situations in which this isn't even gonna happen. Like, even in like havoc and whatever, like difficult havocs, the amount of times where my allies are getting their toughness fully broken is super low. It's almost never going to be relevant for me to get 10% strength as a result of that. And we've got gold toughness, so like on lower difficulties, this probably doesn't even activate like barely at all, because your allies are always using gold to like shield themselves and be invincible, and yeah. And then the knockdown thing is funny for a meme. You could do that plus all the revive speed curios and have 60% revive speed when someone gets knocked down. That'd be kind of funny. But that's about it. Dog needs to chill the fuck out. All right, Unbreakable. Shame that this is here and not, these aren't swapped, because I would love to take Unbreakable for certain builds, but your perfect blocks can block all melee attacks. Now, they don't tell us what perfect block is, but I have to assume that that is just blocking within some sort of window of when the attack actually hits you. There's no like actual input in the game. I've never heard of this terminology before in my fucking life. It doesn't normally have any extra effects, but yeah, your perfect blocks can block all melee attacks. On perfect block, gain 20% melee damage on your next attack. So this is gonna be a C tier for me. One, it's losing points because of its placement. It's being taxed heavily for being behind this talent right here. I would rate it B normally, I think, but you have to take this D tier thing to get to this. And this is a purely defensive, well, not purely defensive, as you can see by the melee damage thing there, but you have to do a perfect block before you can get that 20% melee damage, and it lasts for one attack. So, I mean, and it doesn't say it doesn't take stamina. Your perfect blocks will still take stamina. So if you get overheaded by a crusher, you take 0 damage if you perfect block it. but it will completely nuke your stamina bar as a result. And then you get 20% damage on your next attack. What I think this should be is that this should swap to here, and then the damage buff for doing that should go to like 50%. And then that could actually be a play style of like waiting around for an enemy to hit you and then retaliating. Because right now, if you're waiting around for enemies to hit you, you are tempting fate is what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, if you're trying to like just perfectly time blocks and then counter attack, it's sort of like playing with the Katachan Devil Sword, right? It's like, okay, yes, you can get something done by using the parry and then doing some damage back, or you could just run the dueling sword and just go on the fucking aggressive and kill everything and stab it to death before it even gets a chance to attack you, which is the proper way to do it. The best defense is murder. Okay, so that finishes this little tree off here. No, it doesn't. We got to do stay close. Stay close is very solid. 15% toughness replenishment. It's all types of toughness replenishment. So it is coherency, but it's also the amount of toughness that's replenished from each wave of chorus. It's the amount of toughness that you replenish when you're inside of the bubble, the rate at which it grows. It's the toughness that you replenish from your taunt, importantly. And I think it's really nice. I don't think it... I would like it to be like a little bit higher, but it is a very strong stat. I will give this one an A tier. I think it's pretty dang good. In like a lot of builds, a lot of team comps don't necessarily benefit from the melee damage. So if you are going on this side of the tree and you don't want to take these range stuffs over here, if you're going on this side of the tree, you take slam and you grab this and you're on your way, because you're definitely coming down here already. So yeah, you take your this, and it's just a nice passive bonus to the toughness that everyone regains. And that little bit of extra toughness or recuperation, it adds up, honestly. Like, it's the difference between like having 85% toughness and having 100% toughness, and that can prevent you from taking damage to an attack. So yeah, I approve. Coming over here on the right side, we've got ammo stash. Increase your ammo reserve by 25%. I mean, by all means, if you're coming on this side of the tree and you're grabbing your range stuff, that's certainly an A tier. That's a lot of ammo. I would rank it the same on the veteran. The Ogryn's weapons, his best weapons, the kickback and the rumbler, are very ammo limited, and 25% goes a long way. It's also not interrupting anything to take it. So yeah, it's just a kind of a freebie pickup. I mean, you could skip over it, but I can't think of a range build where I'd be like, nah, I don't do this. Excuse me. Then we got to talk about Big Boom. Okay, so Big Boom. A Big Boom is relevant to two weapons, right? It's relevant to the Rumbler, and it's relevant to the Grenadier Gauntlet. And, it's irrelevant to throwing your bombs, throwing your grenades. So I guess there's that too. 27.5% explosion radius is a big, big increase to that. So I'm going to give this one an A tier, with the caveat of you have to be using one of the explosive weapons to do it. If you are not using an explosive weapon, then this is way lower. Like, I mean, just don't take this at all. If you're using an explosive weapon, you are approved to take this right here. If you're not using an explosive weapon, do not take this. What are you fucking doing? you don't just take this because you have grenades or whatever. You're insane. Okay, coming down here, we've got what is this called? Concentrate. 60% sway reduction, 20% spread reduction, and 15% recoil reduction while bracing a ranged weapon, but lose 0.5 stamina per second. C tier. Oops. I mean, C tier. If I could get the thing to freaking copy. This is C tier. Think about the comparable, whatever, however you say that word, veteran talent here. The veteran talent, which drains 0.75 stamina per second and an additional 0.1 stamina per shot, gives you 25% crit in addition to all this stuff, in addition to like some recoil reduction and stuff like that. This is just sway reduction and spread reduction. One, if we are using a Ripper gun, we don't really want spread reduction, because remember, Ripper guns and shotguns, like the kickback in general, we want more spread because they have a minimum pellet count. The wider cone of enemies you can hit, you want to hit enemies with one pellet. You want to hit every enemy in a 50-meter cone with a single pellet, because they end up taking damage proportional to, like, 5 or 6 pellets, and then they die. So spread reduction is actually kind of a negative. And sway reduction, I can't remember playing with, like, Twin Lake Stubborn having sway be a factor, and you're just draining your stamina. Like, that's just not good, especially considering this is S tier. So you lose that damage reduction, which you're probably using. I hope you're using. I don't know, man. That kind of sucks to me. Sorry, not to be negative, but something else that sucks is fire away. I've seen several people taking this, and actually, if you go and watch my video that I just uploaded earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, depending on when I actually get this edited and uploaded, with the Grenadier Ogryn, I had this talent in that video, and I want you to look at the scoreboard at the end. I have 1.8 million damage. The amount of damage that came from this talent right here was like 130,000. 130. Well, that's just burn damage, right? So that could even be from fire barrels and stuff potentially. But yeah, it's almost nothing. If you look at it on a boss, because it only stacks to 8 instead of stacking further, this only applies through explosions. So yeah, it'll get fully stacked if you throw a grenade box at an enemy. But if you're using the Grenadier Gauntlet or you're using the Rumbler, the only other 2 explosions you probably have access to, it's going to take 4 explosions. It's going to take 4 shots to get it fully stacked at 8 whole stacks. And that's presuming you get it in close range. It takes 8 shots if you don't get it in close range, which you probably are. But 8 stacks of burning on a boss does like 120, 125 damage. Compare that to the 500 damage that the bleed is doing if you're using the Grenadier, or the if you're using the Rumbler and you have the 4 stacks of bleed on there, that can stack to 16, and after 4 grenades the bleed is doing 500 damage per tick. So like, that bleed is 4 times better than this, and it doesn't take a talent point. It's literally just a blessing on the gun. It's the best blessing on the gun. So yeah, this is like C tier for sure. It has like some edge use case, but since there's no other synergies with burning or anything in the tree, and this burn is so low, I just can't I can't say it's any good at all. But I will say that this right here, Coward Culling, is pretty good. Coward Culling is 20% damage to enemies that are suppressed. One thing that we really like about the Ogryn tree is that it augments damage to enemies. The enemies that are affected are the ones who are taking more damage. So if these enemies are suppressed, you take the damage that goes into them, and you don't multiply that damage, you multiply the damage that they receive. So it ends up being a much bigger number, because this applies to all the burns and all your allies, and it's really, really easy to suppress enemies with some of the best weapons in this game. Like, the Rumbler suppresses everything in like 50 feet, basically. Like, enemies cower from those grenade explosions. Enemies that are anywhere near a plasma gun shot are cowering and are suppressed. Enemies with the kickback, it's really easy to suppress, and this gives you extra suppression dealt as well. So, enemies at range end up getting suppressed, and they take a lot more damage from our burns, from our bleeds, from pretty much everything. Oh, like Flame Staff. Whenever you get start shooting the Flame Staff at enemies, they start going like, oh, my face, and they're suppressed, and they start taking 20% extra damage. So you multiply those burn stacks by 1.2 for the Psyker. Very, very useful for him. So this is a good pairing if you got a Flame Staff Psyker on the team. So very nice. All these auras are good. I think they're all about equivalent, but they have their different use cases, right? All right, moving down here into the last leg, we're into the Keystone branches, and man, these have a lot of talents in them, probably as much talents as I've done so far. Jesus, how long is this video going to be? Who knows? Okay, going over here on the left side, we've got 2 Stubborn to Die, 100% toughness replenishment while below 33% health. Jeez. That's a big ask, right? 33% health. You do have 3 wounds as an Ogryn, so if you get down twice, you have that last wound, and then you don't have to worry about regaining above it, or you could just lower your health intentionally. The thing is like, toughness replenishment the problem is like you have to replenish the toughness, right? And so how are you going to do that? You could have taunt up and then that would be pretty good. But the thing is like the taunt regeneration is already so high. I can't see. I mean, if you watch my taunt Ogryn video, you saw that I was getting hit in that first intro clip and it would be like a fraction of a second before it was filled back up. So this just would cut that fraction of a second in half. And yeah, like whatever. Now your melee attacks, when you heavy attack with a melee, you'll gain 30% toughness back or whatever. But you have to be missing that toughness to gain it back. And so like the second you get hit, if you haven't regained it yet, this talent is doing nothing. And remember, you're on 33% health. So you're vulnerable when you get hit and you don't have toughness, and then you need to do something to regain it. So I think it's kind of okay in concept, but you are playing with fire with this talent, and I think there's better other places to spend it. I'm gonna give this one a C tier. I think it might be a B, but I'm gonna give it a C tier just because I can't really figure out or like think of a build where I want to. I mean, I want to have higher toughness replenishment, but I don't want to sacrifice my health to do it. And when I'm on a low health situation, what if I just keep my toughness full by avoiding damage or having gold toughness that isn't getting broken? Okay, moving on from that, we've got 2.5% attack speed, melee attack speed on chain hit for 5 seconds, stacks 5 times, S tier for certain. You know, attack speed is so essential on every class. Attack speed makes you do more damage and take less damage because it lowers the windows between your attacks, and therefore it lowers the windows where enemies can actually hit you because you're going to lay them out flat or kill them. And this thing is really easy to stack up. You do have to chain the hits. You can't miss any attacks, but you know, it's really easy to get going on Ogryn because his swings are so wide, and he has things like Taunt and Bull Rush that can put him in close proximity to tons of enemies that are going to be very easy to melee. We like attack speed, so yeah, S. Always take melee. Always take melee attack speed whenever you get a chance for it if you're a melee character. Delight and Destruction, also S tier. Wow, yeah, got some S's down here, baby. Delight and Destruction gives you 8% damage resistance, which, as a reminder, damage resistance trumps toughness damage resistance. It applies to both your health and your toughness. So if your toughness is broken, you still got this, baby. Per bleeding enemy in melee range, stacks 4 times. So it is so crazy easy to get this up these days. If you've got Batter and you've got 1 light attack, you now have 4 bleeding enemies within melee range of you. Easy peasy. Yeah, it's like, it's so easy to have this going up, and it's just such a huge amount. 32% damage resistance if you have this going on. I mean, think about this. If you're like soloing a boss, you still get 8% damage resistance against that boss. That's like as much as you get for only 5 seconds for killing an elite or a special from a strongman, and it's literally the whole time. It's as long as those enemies are bleeding. So very, very powerful. Implacable. 15% damage reduction while charging melee attacks. So this can be good and it can be not good. You know, if you're not charging melee attacks, obviously this is bunk. But if you're using a solely melee attack chain build, like you're just using heavy shield edge slam or Bully Club Mark 1, you're just doing repeated bonks overhead, it can be pretty dang good, especially in combination with the next node down here. It's damage. It's a solid amount of damage reduction. Here's what I'm going to say. It's going to be just like this node over here. If you are not going for a heavy attack build, obviously this is going to be way, way worse. Don't take it, dum-dum. But if you're going for a heavy attack build, I want to give this an A tier, because if you're just constantly heavy attacking, usually the time where you're going to take some damage is when you're charging your heavy attack, right? You're going to take damage because it takes a second to launch the attack, and it's going to make you take less. And then we have to go from here and go down. I'm also going to give this one A tier. Now, it's not no stopping me is become uninterruptible while charging heavy melee attacks. Remove 100% of heavy melee attack movement speed penalties. The first part is pretty much useless. I'm pretty certain that the only weapon, based on my testing, the only weapon that can actually get interrupted while you're charging a heavy melee attack is the knife. The other weapons don't have that property, so that's not a thing. But all weapons for the Ogryn, when they charge their heavy melee attacks, have a very slow like as soon as you start to charge it, you'll see your speed drops like drastically, and then you start walking fast again. It's very strange how that works. I don't know why it is, but this removes that, and so you can close a much bigger gap. Now, skilled Ogryns, what they'll do is they'll start to charge and they'll immediately power slide so that they kind of skip that slowdown portion. So you can skip this on some builds, but if you're going for exclusively heavy attack stuff, you know, this is very, very strong. It allows you to stay immobile, and you can sprint while you're doing it. You can sprint and charge heavy attacks, which is, you know, pretty cool. So yeah, A tier for sure for heavy attackers. Then we've got Heavy Hitter. Heavy Hitter is an S tier talent down here, or S tier Keystone. This stacks 24% melee damage. It stacks 1 stack per light attack hit and 2 stacks on a heavy attack hit. Pretty damn easy to have this up. It's got a 7.5 second duration and only falls off 1 stack at a time. So pretty easy to have this completely stacked up and no problem there. And then what really follows is the benefits you get for having those stacks, which is don't feel a thing. Heavy Hitter also grants 1.5% toughness damage reduction for each stack, and then this is a choice between this one or Unstoppable. Heavy Hit also grants 15% toughness replenish from melee kills for each stack. So I will rank that toughness damage resistance, I'll rank that as a B tier, because if you think about it, 1.5% toughness damage resistance for each stack is 12% toughness damage reduction. That's pretty good, right? But at this point, in the tree, you have so much damage reduction from up here, from the 25% that Ogryn has as a passive, from the little nodes like this one that you probably have if you're on this side of the tree, from Delay and Destruction, that this is giving less of a return, and we would probably I would prefer personally to have more way of boosting my toughness back up. And so I give the A tier here to the its opposition, Unstoppable, because this gives you 100, when it's fully stacked, 120% toughness replenish from melee kills, which means that your melee kills, instead of giving 5% of your toughness, will give you 11%, which is quite a bit. You know, we have an S tier talent on the Veteran that gives you 5% toughness on all kills, right? So your melees become 10 and your ranges become 5, and that's really, really solid. This is going to give you 11% on all melees, which means that when you're fighting like small enemies in a horde, don't even worry about taking little chip hits, because the second you kill any of them, they're just bumping your toughness right back up. And then that toughness is already plenty tough. You don't need no feel a thing necessarily. Just getting started, when Heavy Hitter is at 8 stacks, gain 10% attack speed. Duh, you're taking that if you're taking Heavy Hitter. Come on. That's just an S tier for sure. Moving on past it, we got Great Cleaver. Heavy Hitter also grants 15% cleave for each stack, which means you would have 120% cleave at max stacks. Compared to Impactful, Heavy Hitter also grants 10% impact for each stack. So this kind of depends on which weapon you use. Neither one of them is bad, but I'm going to give A tier to the Great Cleaver. Great Cleaver, you know, it allows you to get through multiple enemies and get those bleeds onto multiple enemies, and it can be very, very valuable for certain weapons that just don't have that oomph. But I think the real winner here is is Impactful. 80% impact is a crazy amount of impact, and it scales certain weapons that already have very high impacts, like the shield, you know, like clubs and stuff, and just staggers, like perma staggers enemies. Ragers used to be a scary enemy for Ogryns that I've addressed previously, because they would like get on them and you can't get them off of you because they just won't get staggered. With that much stagger, they are staggered. They are now staggered. And because Ogryn has additional benefits on his clubs and on shield, where enemies that are staggered take additional damage, this is huge. This is mainly the difference between your heavy attack that comes in, just giving them a light stagger or no stagger, and laying them out on the floor. 80% is massive. Coming back up here for the last little bits of this left tree, we got Dominate, 10% rending for 10 seconds on Elite Kill. I'm going to give this a B tier. Sort of falling off of it. I think there's better stuff to spend that point on. You know, 10% rending, it's fine. It's definitely better if you are... if you're like in high havocs and there's a ton of crushers and stuff around, it's good. But if it's not crushers and maulers in the menu today, it doesn't give you much benefit. And because clubs have just gotten so much better, you know, clubs are now giving brittleness, which just kind of negates the need for rending. Stuff is already dying really fast anyway, so that rending isn't that valuable. And then we've got this little talent right below it that's called Bash and Blast. 2.5% range damage on melee kill lasts 8 seconds. Max stack 6. So that would be, what is that? 15% range damage on your melee kill. And this doesn't fall off. It's not range damage for one shot. You get 8 seconds of it. So presumably what you do is you'd kill, and you'd swap to your range weapon and go boom, 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 boom. You know, not bad. I haven't really found a build yet where I was like super sold on this being what I need, that 15% damage. I kind of wish it was like you build up these stacks and then the next time you pull out your range weapon, it starts the countdown then of 8 seconds. You have 8 seconds to deal the damage that you need to deal with that bonus, because like feeling like you have to swap right after you got some melee kills and shoot some range attacks is kind of jank for me. I don't think that there's any guns on the Ogryn where this is particularly all that useful. I mean, think about it. Like if you're a melee Ogryn, what are you using as your secondary? You're probably using, like if you're trying to snipe, you're using the heavy stubber. If you're anything else, you're using the rumbler or the kickback. And so what? You can get like 2 shots off of any of those weapons in 8 seconds, and 15% melee damage or range damage isn't making a whole lot of difference. So I'm just gonna give this a B tier. I mean, if you want to take it, go ahead, be my guest, but I'm not thrilled about it. Coming over here, Attention Seeker. Blocking or pushing enemies taunts them for 8 seconds. I'm going to give this a solid A tier right here. This is a really useful thing. If you don't have taunt already on your build, say you are, you know, your charge Ogryn, taunting enemies can pull bosses, mess with boss AI and get them to pull off. It's really, really useful with new havoc with these captains, and especially the twins, because the twins are just like fucking obsessive. The Rinda one will just like the lady with the sword will just pick one of your allies and just go ham on them and try to murder them, and you can just be like, hey, come over here, bitch, and pull her to you with this taunt thing. So it can be very, very valuable to be able to do that. And this will also shut down you know, lots of enemies. It just deep fries their AI, so they're like, oh, I need to go attack this guy now. And it's, you know, it's a gateway to stuff further down. But yeah, I can't rate it an S tier because you probably already have Loyal Protector on like half of these builds. So yeah, we've got No Pushover. This right here is an A tier for certain. This talent is so cool. I love that they added this in. This makes so much space for you, and on an 8-second cooldown, it's a little bit long, but like this can be a game saver. This can get it like blasts a big cone in front of you of all the enemies away and clears space for you to move if you need to move, which is oftentimes a problem that Ogryns have you know, an issue with, is like now it's not the small enemies that are blocking you, it's like elites that'll get around you now. And this will straight up shove down maulers, but more importantly, it shoves open bulwarks so that you can land some hits on them and get them like for real staggered and murder them. Very, very nice to be able to have that on hand, and it's just a nice little safety mechanism. I even have it on my Grenadier build, which I just published, because, you know, you'll never know when you're going to get backed into a corner and you've got a Crusher who's about to drop an overhead on you, and all you got to do is shove him, and it's your get out of jail free card. Once every 8 seconds you say, nope, whatever's about to attack me, nope, don't do it, and then you get the fuck out of there. So really nice. Hard Knocks down here. Enemies staggered by your melee attacks take 15% more melee damage for 5 seconds. Now, if you are coming down all this way, this one is for certain also an S. I think that you know, it's very deep for a for some builds, but I think it's worth it. I absolutely think it's worth it. I mean, if you saw my club build, it's so easy, especially if you have impactful down here. It's so easy to get this stagger, this stagger going, that yeah, you just want that for that melee damage, because this is another boost to enemies' damage taken, and most of the damage that Ogryn's deal these days is melee. Now I realize that at this point that I've fallen a little bit off of my recommended paths of like, hey, S's are only for you know, they're like in every build or whatever, but when I'm saying S's is like, okay, you understand that this is for like melee builds, right? These are S's for when you're using a melee. And I'll specify when things are even higher than that, and they should be used in all builds. Like, for instance, this one right here. This is Bruiser. Bruiser gives you cooldown regeneration for 3 seconds after you or an ally in coherency kill an elite enemy. Now, unfortunately, this got a nerf. It used to be 4%. Actually, it used to be 5%, and then it was 4%. This just instantly. And the sorry, I was laughing at a text. The cooldown now gives you 3 seconds over 3 seconds, and it does not overlap, but you know, it's still going to give you a solid amount of cooldown. If you're consistently killing elites, it's just going to have your cooldown, right? If you're killing an elite every 3 seconds, you're going to have half the cooldown on your ability. So very, very nice. You know, it's solid. You don't even have to be the one that kills them. It can just be an ally in coherency. And there's tons of elite enemies, so the higher difficulty you play, the more relevant this is. So that's an absolute S tier for everybody. Every talent tree should be taking this. Compare that to this one in the middle. This is 20% weapon swap speed. I think that this is just B tier. It's okay on certain like builds. If you already have taunt, like from up here, you probably don't need attention seeker, so you can just take this for that extra buff. I did that in my build that my grenadier build, so that's the one case where you could probably use it in. But if you're going for a straight up melee build, you should probably be just going down this left side with the taunt and then the S tier stuff. If you're going for a solely ranged focus build, you could just come down this right side and ignore it entirely if you just don't have the points. Speaking of get stuck in, on activating your combat ability, you and allies in coherency gain 20% move speed and are also immune to stuns and suppression for 4 seconds. This is an S tier ability. This is, I try to pick this up on most of my stuff, just because 20% move speed is a lot. Movement speed in this game is broken, because any increase to movement speeds, it completely gasses like enemies. Like, they can't catch you if you're moving any faster than default speed. Like, you're almost faster than them with default, and then any additional movement speed, and they can't catch you. So this allows you to kite enemies and just keep them in do a loop and get ahead of them to get a resurrection or something. Or, you know, if you need to make an aggressive play and get in close on enemies, this allows them to do that as well. If you're a charge Ogryn, then you're charging in and you want your allies to follow you with that charge while everything is disrupted, and that's perfect for this. If you're a taunt Ogryn, you want to be closing that gap so that you can get in there and get those enemies taunted and get them onto you and move around and grab more enemies with your different pulses, so that's very valuable then. Even if you're a gunner Ogryn, like, this is going to keep you mobile. It's going to allow you to reposition for a couple of seconds, and it's going to help your allies to reposition as well. So I think this is S tier for sure. Speaking of S tiers, man, there's so many good talents down here. That's why I was dogging on shit earlier in the tree. No hurting friends. So one of the playtesters pointed this out to me. This triggers on damage taken by you or allies in coherency. That includes toughness damage taken. So if your allies take 5 incidences of 1 point of toughness damage, and it lasts 10 seconds too, which is crazy. You know, every 10 seconds, does someone on your team that is near you take at least 1 point of toughness damage? Yes, obviously. And so this stays stacked a lot of the time. And what you get when this is stacked is up to 12.5% strength. Strength affects your damage, strength affects your stagger, and strength affects your something else, whatever. But strength is really good. It's like an S tier stat. And then when it's fully stacked, you get 15% toughness damage reduction, which is really, really easy to do. And it includes stuff damage taken by you. So like, you know, if you start getting shot by a gunner and you get bursted and you get 5 hits of damage on your toughness, congratulations. Now you have 15% toughness damage reduction and a bunch of strength. So this is an S tier blessing for certain. Moving off of S tier blessings, we've got Won't Give In. If you watch my content for any amount of time, you know that I don't like these play from behind sort of talents. I like the ones that keep you ahead and you stay ahead, win more. Won't Give In gives you 20% damage reduction for each knocked out or incapacitated ally within 20 meters. This just isn't good. Because here's the thing. Is this, you're already in a bad situation, right? Having more damage reduction isn't what's going to save you in a situation where your allies are downed. It's what's going to happen when your allies are downed is you're going to get trappered or you're going to get dogged or something like that. If this also made you immune to dogs while it's going on, maybe. But I think it's pretty poor because it's just like, actually, I'm just going to give it a D. Who cares? There's so many other ways to get down to the Keystone. No one's taking this shit. Like, come on. You're having to wait for your allies to be knocked down. And then what happens? Okay, so your allies are knocked down. You get this benefit while they're knocked down. If you help them up, like you're fucking supposed to do, you lose this buff. So all the rest of the time in the game, if you're doing well, this doesn't trigger at all. And then, if you don't get them back up, they fucking die. And then they're not within 20 meters of you anymore, so you don't get the buff. Like, if this was just for you get 20% damage reduction for each knockdown or incapacitated ally or dead ally, then you would have 60% damage reduction when all your allies are dead, and that could be something. We could talk about that, but it's nothing currently. All right, we got to get on to Feel No Pain, which got that rework. Feel No Pain starts with 10 stacks. Each stack grants 2.5% toughness and toughness replenishment and 2.5% damage reduction. So mathing that out as 2.5 or 25% shit, 25% toughness replenishment, which is all types, and 25% damage reduction, which is very nice. Taking damage removes 1 stack. Stacks are restored every 3 seconds. Okay, so it takes 30 seconds to get all your stacks back, and taking damage removes a stack. I do believe that there is a cap on how fast, it doesn't say it here, but I think there's a cap on how fast you can lose those stacks too. So it's not like if you get hit by a Reaper, you lose all 10 stacks instantly because he shoots you 10 times. So I think it's like 1 second per stack. But yeah, really easy to keep these stacks fairly high, and this is a solid blessing. I am not gonna lie, this is a very, very solid blessing. Man, I've been putting a lot of S's down here. I just realized. Like, I don't know, man. Like, it's really good. It's just really good. I got a lot of S's to give. This is just really solid. I think I have to give it another S. I'm sorry, guys. It looks like I'm just being way too generous with it, but like, this is such a fit all. You know, if you're going for a tank build, this is good. If you're going for a melee build, it's pretty good. Like, you could do a melee build and just go for toughness stuff. This makes you so crazy hard to kill, because think about this. Ogryn has a 25% damage reduction passive. Now he gets another 25% damage reduction. They don't stack additively, they stack multiplicatively, but you know, you're losing like 3% effectiveness there. Like, you're taking very little damage when you're at 10 stacks. And then you get this toughest replenishment thing, and we got to go on to talk about toughest, which gives you an additional 2.5% toughness replenishment per stack. So this multiplies all your toughness gains by 1.5. So when you taunt enemies, say that you taunted the maximum amount of enemies. Say you taunted 20 enemies, and you would normally be regaining 10% of your toughness every second for 3 seconds, plus you replenish 10% instantly. So instead, what this would do is it would make you replenish 15% instantly, and then you would replenish 15% every second for 3 seconds. That's 45% in that first 3 seconds, and it's 45%. So you replenish like over 150% of your toughness. That's crazy. That also applies to the toughness replenishment from your for your hits up here. So when you heavy attack with best defense or smash them, you're now replenishing 22.5% of your toughness on those heavy attacks, which is big. And then you probably also have stay close for another 15%, so add a little bit more on that for 65% additional toughness replenishment. It just makes you a toughness god. If you have gold toughness on your team and you have this, you're not fucking dying, unless you are really messing up, because your toughness is now so massive, and your toughness takes no damage, and you can replenish it like crazy. So yeah, this got a world better from where it used to be, and I have to give that also the S tier, because it's 1 point and it almost literally doubles the effectiveness of the Keystone, which is, it doesn't give you that more damage reduction, but it gives you more replenishment, which is pretty good too. I want to give this pain outburst. When no feeling of pain reaches 5 stacks or below, you push back enemies and replenish 50% toughness. This effect can occur once every 30 seconds. This is actually honestly pretty good. I'm gonna give this an A tier. This is, obviously, again, these rankings apply if you're taking this fucking Keystone. Obviously, wouldn't it be funny if I put an S over here and it said ass? That'd be so hilarious. You're so funny, Mr. E. Obviously, you wouldn't be taking these hangers on if you didn't take the Keystone. But this is A tier. It's certainly a lot better than it used to be, where it used to give you 20% when you were like almost fucking dead. When you had 0 stacks, you would get 20%. You're like, woohoo, I have 1 more bullet worth of toughness. Now, if you've taken damage 5 times, you knock back enemies and replenish 50% toughness. And that can be kind of a game changer. So I do like this. It's not always like necessarily like worth the points. Oh, but do remember, right, that when this activates, that 50% toughness, that's a replenishment, and we'll have when it activates at 5 stacks, you'll have an additional 25%. So it actually replenish 62.5% toughness. So pretty good, right? And then it knocks back enemies, so it gives you a break when you most need it, when you're starting to take some serious damage. So pretty good, but it's not absolutely essential if you're going for this sort of build. Strongest. Pushing enemies destroys 1 stack of Feel No Pain. I'm going to rank this one as a C tier. I think this is just a wasted point. These come back every 3 seconds. Yeah, you can get back a stack by pushing enemies in combat or whatever, but you know what else? You could just be slamming enemies with the edge of your shield and they would stay staggered like that, instead of wasting stamina and stuff to push them, unless you're going a very push-centric build. These stacks come back so quick, and yeah, I just don't think you really need it in that way. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a C tier. I think skip this one personally. Coming over here for our last little bit, guys, and man, this video is gonna be super long, isn't it? Maybe I should put it on like 1.3 speed and see if you guys notice I'm crazy, like cocaine sped up. Pacemaker. Okay. Pacemaker. Hitting 3 or more enemies with a single attack grants 15% reload speed on your next reload. Okay, so this, I think this whole tree here is going to be a little bit lower ranked because these just aren't generally as usable as some of this other stuff. So I am going to give this one a B tier. This is B tier because, you're not picking this up for any builds that aren't range builds. And certain range weapons can use this, like the kickback, like the rumbler, like the ripper gun. But certain ones, like the new like sniper rifle guns and the twin link stubber, have a really hard time doing this. You can use your melee attack to trigger and then reload, but that's just adding an extra step in. I think the weapons this really shines on are the rumbler and the kickback. And certainly the same goes for reload and ready, which is 15% range damage for 8 seconds on reload. Same thing applies here. This has limited usability because certain weapons reload and certain weapons really kind of don't. But if you are a weapon that reloads like frequently, like the kickback and the rumbler, you get the full benefit out of this. But if you're the other 4 Ogryn range weapons, you don't get anything. So it's like B or A for the kickback or rumbler. I mean, it's just A for kickback or rumbler, but for everything else, it's like C or below, because you only get this for 8 seconds after you reload. It does activate after you press this button, though, so that's good. Okay, spray and slay. 15% melee damage and 7.5% melee attack speed for 6 seconds after emptying your clip. Okay, so, I mean, here's the thing, is like, I understand what they're going for with this. They wanted this hybrid thing. See how this and this, they're mirrored. They were being funny. They thought they were like clever here, right? They said, okay, we got bash and blast and spray and slay. See what I mean? It's mirrored. They want you to get melee kills, 6 melee kills, and then swap and do some range attacks, and then swap back. Well, here's the problem with that. You have to get so deep into both of these sides of the tree in order to get both of these that you're missing out on a lot of stuff. Now, I could think of a couple builds where I might use this, but like for instance, if I'm just going for a full-on melee clobber slobber build, like I've put out a couple of already, where I just have the pickaxe and I'm just cleaving shit, and I have the kickback, right? But there's so many good talents for just melee now that it's literally hurting your melee capacity to come over here and invest stuff in your ranged. And your range is already good enough. Like, you know, you don't need this stuff to make the kickback do what it's supposed to do, or make the rumbler do what it's supposed to do. And the same thing applies to bash and blast. It's like, you don't need this to give the rumbler 15% extra damage, or the ripper gun 50% extra damage. So I'm going to rank this one, I think I'm going to rank this one, I think I'm going to rank it C. And I'm also going to re-rank this one over here. And I'm going to also rank that C. They're too deep in the tree. They're too lost in the sauce for my taste. They require too much investment, and they require too much management. When you could just go unga bunga and be an all-range shoot a bunch of grenades boy, or be an all-melee warrior and just stick to your like role, right? You could just do that. And this hybrid stuff is cool, but it needs to be more accessible. 2 points of investment on both sides, a 6-point investment to have some sense of hybridization sucks. There is one good type of hybridization that we're about to get to, though, that I really like for this. Okay, mobile emplacement. You take 20% reduced damage while bracing a ranged weapon. Nah, just skip this one. I'm going to give this C. This is only applicable to like 2 weapons. It's applicable to like maybe the ripper guns, I guess, you're bracing those, and the stubbers, the heavy and twin link stubbers. But yeah, like just, I mean, are you really tanking damage while you're shooting with those? Most times, no. So why are we just like, we're not a gun tank. Other people are taking the damage and we're just out there shooting. Okay, Unstoppable Momentum, though, is really good. 20% movement speed for 3 seconds on ranged kill. S tier? S tier, yeah. This is really nice. You know, again, movement speed is awesome, and this can allow you in a pinch. Like, think about this, right? What's the problem with like when you're in a melee situation and the trapper shows up and is about to fuck you? It's not that like you can't deal with a trapper. It's that if you go to deal with that trapper, there's 4 other enemies that are about to fuck your shit up. They're getting ready to attack you. So this says that when I invest my half a second to swap to my ranged weapon and then shoot that trapper, I'm going to get a payoff for it. Not only is that trapper gone, but now I have a little bit of extra movement speed. I can increase that gap between me and the crusher that was about to slam me, and that actually generates value. And the same thing applies to like using the rumbler or anything. Sometimes you just need to blow some shit up and make some distance, and that can make the difference. So I do really like this, especially because it's only a 1-point dip, because this can be used hybridized with melee. You know, you want some extra movement speed with melee. Sometimes you got to pull out your ranged weapon and deal with some shit in melee, and 20% movement speed is a good stat for melee too. So it's a 1 point, and it's a good little dip for it. Okay, Massacre. Killing an enemy grants 1.5% critical chance for 12 seconds, stacks 8 times. Okay, so this is now 12% crit chance, and man, Is it C or is it B? I'm going to go with B here. You know, crits don't hurt anybody. Some of the weapons do all right with crits. They get like 50% crit ratio. If this was on any other class, it would be fucking bonkers. But it's on Ogryn, who has a 2.5% base crit ratio, or base crit chance. So this really only brings him up to 14.5% crit, excluding any weapon buffs. And then you just don't have that big crit modifier. We don't have the dueling sword. So like, your crits really don't do that much extra. And the same thing applies for Lucky Streak, which increases your critical strike damage. It only increases the critical strike damage on the weapons that we have. If we had this on the dueling sword, which does 3.5 times the normal damage on critical strikes, or sorry, 2.5 times damage on critical strikes, what this would do would be make it 3.75 times damage, which would be absolutely bonkers insane. But the Ogryn's weapons max out at having like a 50% multiplier on critical hits. There's certain weapons like the heavy stubber, the sniper heavy stubbers, that do benefit from this a little bit more, but generally it's not all that impressive. It'll be a couple hundred damage on like kickback or something, but I think you could better spend the points elsewhere. So I will also give that a B. I don't know. Yeah, B, it's fine. It's not hurting you, right? Here's the thing. If you've got the points to flex, if you're doing some sort of melee build and maybe, you know, you have found that like somehow crits is the way, you could come over here and flex for this range point, and then you could take these two and get some extra crits into your melee hits, and that might be all right. But just generally the melees don't do all that crazy much. I wish these were closer to the top of the tree so they could be dipped easier. All right, and then we got to talk about blow. Blow no longer blows, guys. Hey, they did something about it. Now, they didn't take my recommendations for it, not all the way anyway. I think this is kind of close to something I was saying, but Burst Limiter Override used to give 8% base up to 12% with an augment chance to trigger these free ranged attacks. And the problem with that is, like, I mean, how long are you going to have to fucking shoot to get one trigger of that if you're shooting like the kickback or something? So they increased it to 15%, which is like 1 in 6.3. Very nice. And they made it so that when you get kills with ranged attacks, it also gives you stacking range damage up to 20%, which is also very valuable. So even if it's not triggering, you get range damage out of this, which is super nice. So I do think this is like an A tier blessing, or a A tier thing. I guess I'm almost done, so I'll let this song play out. Okay, then we're going to talk about Back Off. Back Off is currently glitched. It doesn't trigger on every melee attack. It only triggers one time per melee attack instead of on every melee kill, but it is S. Back Off gives you 10% additional chance to get a lucky shot per melee kill that you get. Yeah, which is awesome because it's free. It's free shots, and it can be very impactful. Obviously, if you're using a less impactful gun with this, like the Twin Lake Stubber or the Ripper gun, who cares? But if you're using the kickback or the grenade or the rumbler, that's a big deal. Getting a double shot out of one of those, or even a triple shot, that's huge. And remember, you got a 15% base chance, so you only have to get like 8 of these, and you're pretty much guaranteed to get it. And it's pretty easy to grab 8 kills. Okay. We've got maximum firepower here. 100% ability cooldown reduction for 4 seconds when Lucky Bullet triggers. This is also A tier. This is, you know, just some extra cooldown. If you're taking this tree, which is a nice thing to mix in hybrid with Bruiser, if you've got those two together, you've got a lot of cooldown reduction. It's very nice. Now, I'm thinking that they left the cooldown on Point Blank Barrage so high because they thought that Point Blank Barrage users will always take Burst Limiter Override and they'll always take maximum firepower, and so their cooldown is going to be short anyway. But that's a shitty reason to do that to them. But it's even better on like Taunt, because Taunt has a way shorter cooldown and now you have this crazy like flat cooldown, and so you get it back real fast. So A tier for this, because it's pretty dang easy to trigger those lucky shots, especially when you can stack up and guarantee one. Good shooting, however, over here is just a C tier, I think. You know, crits again aren't all that impactful on most Ogryn weapons, and so sack. So like, yeah, you got a 15% chance to get a critical hit, but what benefits does the Ogryn get out of crits? Like, there's not really that much huge benefit to it. I think it's much cooler and much more fitting with the Ogryn's kit and where his powers actually lie with this back off thing. So I think maybe only the heavy stubber, the single target heavy stubbers, really benefit from these crit talents right here. So you could use that if you're doing that case. But in every other situation, since these are a one or the other option, choose back off. And then the final things, guys, just as I run out of the full soundtrack of RimWorld, which is what you've been listening to this whole time, we've got Heat of Battle and Bullet Storm. Man, I love that game. I love it. Edgy swearing is my brand exactly. I do actually like that game, though. So Burst Armor Override also grants 1.5% fire rate per stack. That would mean that I think they're talking about the range damage stacks there. So that would be 15%. Fire rate. That's applicable to some weapons, right? It's applicable to like the stubbers, and it's applicable to Ripper Gun, but the single shot guns and the Grenadier Gauntlet, that's not anything. So the range damage increase to you and allies in coherency on Lucky Bullet is much better. So I will give that one an A tier, because you know, if you're going this deep, which I normally don't when I go into the Lucky Bullet tree, this is way better, because like, think about it. This one, when you're firing your gun, right? You say you're firing a twin link stubber in both of these situations. This one, you're gonna have 15% fire rate, so you're gonna do 15% more DPS, but you're gonna be using ammo at 15% increased rate. Over here, you're going to be triggering that Lucky Bullet very frequently because you're using the twin link stubber, so it's coming out really quickly, and it'll be triggering at least once every 8 seconds. So it's going to increase your DPS by 15% because it's giving you that 15% range boost, but you're not using 15% more ammo, and it's going to be giving your allies the buff as well. So I'm going to rank this one A. I'm going to rank this one D, because it's just completely outclassed. Because this one applies to all of the weapons that the Ogryn can use equally. It, you know, if you trigger it, like this does nothing for the single shot weapons. This at least does something for them. And it does something for your allies as well. And if you're using the fast firing weapons, this gives you the same damage while conserving more ammo, and it helps your allies. So I think Fat Shark need to relook at this one, because this is not a choice. It's always Bullet Storm in this case. And there it is, folks. Wow, that took a minute, didn't it? But yeah, that's the whole thing there. We've got the top part of the tree over here. You can see that the top part of the tree, I was much more conservative. I think in general, the top part of the tree has a lot of sort of more weak things. Oh, look, it does say ass right there. Perfect. It has a lot more weak things that you want to definitely avoid. And the reason I was so conservative on the top part of the tree, saying, hey, you know, skip these points, skip this, and move on down, just let's get to the bottom of the tree, is because specifically with these two trees, there is so much juice in here. There are so many valuable talents in the Ogryn tree now that if you had like a couple extra points, it could go a long way. So I hope this really helps. I hope it helps you to design your own builds. That was my idea. Cack. That was my idea behind making. Oh, and it also says BBC. Wow, this is just a gold mine for my sense of humor. Yeah, let me move on past this before I lose my fucking mind. But yeah, I hope that this helps you to sort of understand what I'm looking at when I'm making these builds, and hopefully it helps you if you have extra points in your builds, or maybe you've been like putting your points into what are some questionable talents. You can rethink that and listen to my logic behind why I choose what I choose. And I hope it helps you to improve your builds. Even if you're not copying my builds, I want you to go out there, because Ogryn has so much flexibility right now. You can do so much stuff with him, and I hope this guide helps you on your way to doing that. Okay, with that, I need to go rest my voice and you know, laugh about seeing BBC and cack and ass and stuff in my video. But I appreciate y'all for watching very much. I love y'all, and Mystery is out of here. Like and subscribe. Bye.